Hi, I'm Flip Nicklin. Welcome to Humpback Chronicles. We're heading towards whale season, and starting next month, probably more and more of the stories will be actually in this century. But today, two of my favorite people, Mike Bennett and Tad Luckey, going to give some insights about how it was really before all this whale stuff got going.
Flip's Humpback Chronicles have rekindled so many memories for me of the old Lahaina Harbor of the 70s and how I first met Flip and got caught up in that world of whales that's engaged me off and on really ever since. Well, Lahaina Harbor back then was, and still is, a singular place. And, looking back on it, John Steinbeck's well-worn description of the old cannery row of his youth as a poem, a stink, a grating noise, a quality of light. That really brings back the old harbor for me as well as anything. Stink. I arrived in Lahaina on a holiday after college in the 70s, and I was immediately smitten by the whole harbor scene. I stayed on. I started working on boats in that magical place, dinner boats and sailboats and dive boats. There weren't any whale watching boats back then. It really hadn't caught on yet. But shortly after I got my captain's license, I was fortunate enough to begin working for Tad and Cindy Luckey on their boat Sport Diver.
I met Mike Bennett and Tad Luckey on the same day in 1979. They were going to be the first captains to take me out whale watching as I was working on an IMAX film called Nomads of the Deep. They have both been friends for more than 40 years. Mike has gone on to run boats around the world and to assist me on a number of National Geographic stories. Tad Luckey is a fixture in Lahaina Harbor, a tremendous fisherman, always someone you pass with a smile and always someone who has a good story. But he's also the go-to guy. If someone came and wanted to do a film and wanted to work with whales, Tad Luckey is who I would send him to. Tad has a tremendous personal knowledge of whales and whale behavior, but he also has shared the insights of film crews and scientists for over 40 years. And today's episode is about how it all began.
Good morning. We're just talking about what it was like back in Lahaina in the earlier days, pre-research, pre-permit, before there were rules. I got here in 1972. On my second day here, I took a dive over to Cathedrals in Lanai, and on the way back from that dive, we had the most incredible experience with two humpbacks, double breach, right next to the boat, with over 100 spinner dolphin twisting and turning and landing in the impact zone of these two whales that started peck slapping and tail slapping. And then you look back, and here's Maui with the green, beautiful sugarcane fields and the sun coming over the mountain. It was just like something surreal. Now, I ended up working on the glass bottom boat in Lahaina, and we had a lot of rain, but we were taking people out every trip to try to find the bottom, and you couldn't see a thing, but there were some whales around. And was really interesting, on one trip, all the people ran to the bow and started pointing and looking at whales that were behaving just out in front of town. And so we went and followed the whales around for the entire 2-hour tour and came back in. Everybody was excited. So the skipper of the boat went to the owner and he said, we got to just start signing people up to go look at whales. You can't see the bottom. And the owner, I remember the conversation, I was standing next to him listening, and says, why would anybody want to do that? Just go look at whales. I mean, I couldn't understand it. Anyway, they started signing people up to go look at whales, and that was the very first whale watch ever that I heard of on Lahaina Harbor. In 1973, I shifted work from the glass bottom boat over to the dive shop on Front Street, where I'd just been named the manager at the ripe old age of 19. It seemed that the current manager had just quit and had called the owner in Honolulu, who flew over and stomped around the dive shop and asked who I was. And I told him my name, and he said, wow, that's a really good name. Guess what? You're now the new manager of the dive shop in Lahaina. And he said, "Can you run boats?" And I said, "Sure, I guess. Yeah, I run boats." And he said, "What's the biggest boat you ever ran?" I said, 20 feet or so. And he said, "Well, I'm building a 44-footer. You better get used to driving something bigger." At any rate, he built this beautiful 44-foot single screw dive boat in his backyard by himself on Oahu, and handed me the keys and with the instructions, "Please just take as many charters as you can and make me some money." So at the age of 19, I had a 44-foot dive boat and a dive shop on Front Street. So things were looking good at the time. Meanwhile, my dad, Jim Luckey, had just become the head of Lahaina Restoration Foundation, and it was located directly across the street from the dive shop. And it was his dream job, and he had an open door policy there that anybody could wander in and ask any question under the sun, from where are the bathrooms to who was the first king of the Hawaiian kingdom, and he was very up on all of his Lahaina history. So he had this open door policy, and one day in the afternoon, this tall, lanky, kind of wild-looking Englishman walked in and started asking me questions about whales and boats. He wanted to know if anybody had a boat that could take him out and do some recordings at night for singers, humpback whales that were singing. And he had all of his equipment, but he just needed a boat to take him out. So my dad immediately came up with me to go ahead and volunteered me to take him out on a sunset for a couple hours. So we met Roger at the dock, and he got all of his gear on board, and we went out, and the sun started to go down, and he's got his headset on and his reel-to-reel recorder going, and everything was going good, but he wanted to get closer to the singers. And since we couldn't, visually see them, we started towing the hydrophone behind the boat slowly, so trying to get more closer to any whales that are actually singing, so we can get a better recording. So this is fine, but it went on and on and on and on, and we didn't get back into the harbor till around 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had a charter to take out. So my first impressions of this kind of wild-looking Englishman weren't all that great, since I hadn't gone to sleep all night and had a charter to do. At any rate, this man's name was Dr. Roger Payne. And Roger was the one that pretty much opened up the door to the whale research community and all the film groups that we'd be involved with for the next 40 years. Incredible guy, and just one of the many characters that started out here in Lahaina.
As I said, the first whale job I did in Lahaina was with Mike Bennett and Tad Luckey in 1979. And the most recent TV work I did was with Tad and Cindy Luckey this last season with National Geographic and ABC. I think it's always a pleasure. Thank you. And once again, thank you very much for all of your support. Bye-bye.